Hello, my name is Joe Dillette, and we're doing a restoration job on a mantel. And this is a little bit different because we're not going to be carving wood. This applique on the mantel is really like a putty. I don't know what it really is. It's very old. It's over 100 years old. But how we're going to repair that is by using Bondo. Bondo and a hardening agent. That's what they use on cars. So I went to the automotive store and I picked this up. This is what they use as body filler on a car. And so the hardener mixes with this. It's about 2% hardener to the Bondo. And it takes a few minutes, about 5 minutes working time. So we're going to work with just small amounts. I've got a palette knife and I'm going to be mixing it on glass and just small amounts at a time. And I'm going to be doing the initial shape when it's soft. And after it hardens, you can go in there with your carving tools. It carves like wood. Let me show you what we're going to be doing up close here. Now here are some pieces that are missing, right here and in here. And the reason why it came off, I think, is it didn't really bond well. So what I'm going to do is take a scratch awl and I'm going to do it, rough up the surface a little bit, dig in there a little bit so it creates more of a mechanical bond. So these are the areas. On the other side, we lost a ribbon in that. I'll take you down to the other side. So you can see where it was stuck on. So I've got to reproduce this ribbon, and I will do the same. I will rough up the surface with a scratch awl, take and make a few dents in it so it really bonds well. You can see other missing pieces. So I will take you through the process. And in the center here, more missing pieces here on the top. And looking at the cracks, this is kind of a sign of age, and I'm going to try to reproduce those cracks. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see more. Trying to get it in focus here. And I'm going to try to reproduce some of those cracks and I will be doing it with like a pin or something, so it doesn't look like it. The part that we're putting on is going to be added. We also are going to need to take a little paint and blend it in. I'm not going to paint the whole thing, just the pieces that I'm attaching. I'm going to see if I can match the paint on that. So it's kind of a pretty design, and it's an applique, but it's done with a kind of a putty. I think this was probably a mold that they just kind of glued onto it. So this is just an awl, and I'm going to kind of make little dots, impressions, and that's going to give the Bondo something to grab to. And in this area here too. So the blue is the hardener, the gray is the Bondo itself. And I'm just going to mix it with my palette knife. And I will apply it with my palette knife and do the initial shaping with it. You should apply it in kind of thin layers. Work it into the surface. And as it starts to harden, then it becomes more solid. when it's more solid, then you can build it faster. Just making sure that that's going to be bonded well into the wood. You can see how it's hardening up a little bit already. Its viscosity is changing pretty fast, and it's getting hot. So the heat is part of the drying process. You can see how this really is hardening fast already. Put the hardener over here so I can control it a little bit better. Then I'll just pick up about half of that, get it in there. That should give me a little bit more time to work with it. Make sure it's mixed in pretty good. Maybe I'll just do a little dab more. Just kind of just piling it on right now. And this bead here is larger than the one above it and the one below it. There, now I can see it starting to pile a little bit, so I can build some height with it. So that's the neat thing about this Bondo. It's very durable after it hardens. It can be carved like wood. Pretty easy to work with. Pattern makers use it quite a bit. When I make patterns, I use it. Any carving that you're trying to fasten pieces onto it and you're going to paint over it, Bondo makes a pretty good adhesive. It will bridge gaps very well. Gonna let it set for a few more minutes and then I'll build it up more. So it's easy to clean your glass off. Just scrape it with the palette knife before it gets really dry. And then this is hardening up. I need to mix a little bit more to build this bead a little bit higher. But while it's still kind of soft, I can still go in here now with my palette knife, because it's just kind of like a putty now. And I can start shaping it around the sides. Then after it hardens more, then I'll need to go in there with my chisels. But I can clean up the outline. So all you're really going to have left with the chisels is just to detail it. There, that's getting hard enough. Now I'm going to mix just a little bit more. That's probably too much of the hardener, but I want it to harden pretty quickly. So before it hardens too much, you can get in there and do a lot of the initial shaping. Carves very easily. After it hardens, it takes a little bit more effort. I'm going to let that harden now, and then after it's very hard, then I'll come back and finish that. So we're trying to follow the outline that was left in the wood, and I'm just trying to build it up right now. And getting it higher than I really need, because I can always cut it down. I'm putting a little bit more hardener in so it won't be quite as runny. Kind of helps if you have two palette knives, one to kind of scrape the other. So Bondo is pretty easy to carve. It hardens, but not really hard. So you can't push it down with your fingers or anything, but it has got a real nice carving qualities to it. And it sands, and it takes all kinds of different finishes. So you use your same wood carving tools. Another nice thing, you don't have to worry about what direction the grain's going. The Bondo doesn't have any grain to it, so it's like a hardened clay. You can cut it in any direction. I am doing the priming on the Bondo right now using a white Rust-Oleum semi-gloss oil base, and with that I mixed in a wood stain that is also oil base. I made this pretty runny so it'll soak in good around all the crevices, and then I'm going to go with a top coat on it that's going to be more like an ink. And then I am going to varnish the wood right up to the edges, so I'll clean up the edges then after the painting is done. Here I've got a Rust-Oleum semi-gloss white, and I have a general finish is it's a teak, and I'm mixing in the teak stain, oil-based stain, in with a little bit of the Rust-Oleum white. I'm trying to match that brown that's on the mantle over there. And I'm trying to match the brown. That kind of looks like it's going to be pretty close. This looks like it's going to match pretty good. I will be putting the highlights over the top of it, but with the undercoat and this over the top, then I just need to do a little texturing and run a little darker stain in some spots. We're cleaning up the edges, and then I will apply the dark stain that is going to just kind of lay at the sides. It's a little darker right down next to the wood in the corner, so that's what I'm cleaning out right now, defining that edge along the areas that I added. And then I'm going to restain that. So I've got the base coat on, and then when I do that stain, I will also darken in some of the recessed areas. I have some stain mixed up, and it's the kind of like the ink that's going to go on an antique, and it goes heavy in the deep areas. This is one that I painted here. So it kind of enhances the lines, and then I work it into the corners because I want to get it dark like it is around the rest of it, right at the edges around. Cast a little shadow, defines it a little bit better. And put enough on that it goes into the deeper areas. Now I'm just taking off some of the stain at the high points, kind of highlighted a little bit. We're getting ready for this last coat of varnish, and I noticed that there's a little bit of a darker area right here. This is the one I replaced. I extended the stain a little bit beyond, so I'm going to take off some of the stain. This is a 400 grit emery, and I'm just going to increase the highlights just a little bit to make it look a little bit lighter. Then it'll be ready for the last coat of varnish. That 400 emery, I'm just going to blend in the edges here around the varnish. And then I'm going to carry that varnish out a little bit further. Now a few areas that still the stain is still just a little bit light up by the area that I added. I'm going to put a little bit more stain, let it dry before I put on that last coat of varnish. So this stain now is just kind of laying on top, but I've got varnish mixed with it, and so it's going to dry. It'll dry dull. Well, here is the finished product.